Due to this obstruction, the government is shut down. In the meantime, you can leave a comment for the president at www.whitehouse.gov/contact. We look forward to taking your calls as soon as the government reopens.
And welcome to Stacy on the Right. So that message you just heard is the message that everyone heard if they called the White House switchboard after the shutdown commenced and before it actually ended, which I'm guessing I'm right in seeing all of the news stories that show that the shutdown has been voted down by the Senate and we're back in good operational order, if not soon to be. Fantastic. Welcome to Stacy on the Right. It's no, it's not Tuesday. It's Monday. I don't even know what day it is. It's just been such a whirlwind at our house this whole weekend, getting so many things, trying to get stuff ready to go and get prepared for everything that this week is going to hold. I have some really fun news for next week. Something amazing, at least for me, which means for you as the listeners, is happening next week. And I'm going to tease it because I have to not tell you until I have all the details nailed down. But suffice it to say, I'm taking a trip and you guys are coming with me. All right. So the call lines are open 866-963-2037. And we have a really great program planned for you. So obviously putting the program together before the shutdown was ended so abruptly after the Democrats tried their hand at hardcore, guerrilla warfare, and President Trump, he likes getting in the trenches. That message was savage, and the Democrats were so upset about it. But it was the truth. The Democrats are taking the budget and holding it hostage for a bunch of illegal immigrants, and those people are people, and they deserve some dispensation. And obviously, we as a nation have to figure out what to do. But we don't have to figure out what to do with the government shutdown. That kind of tactic has been frowned upon by the Democrats towards the Republicans. And so if that's the way they feel about it when the Republicans try it, then it shouldn't be okay for them either. You know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander and what have you. So here we are, Monday afternoon now, and we have this brutal White House shutdown message, which you just heard. We also have two guests today, Megan Stifel of the Hoover Institute. She's a fellow there. She's going to come on and talk to us about a couple of really important points here. The regulations on our cyber everything. I know this is a subject that has woven in and out of this program, and it's in the news everywhere with the revelations that all of the messages that we've ever written or sent on Twitter are on some dude's server. And if you send racy pics to your spouse, girlfriend, soon to be girlfriend, soon to be boyfriend, whoever you're sending the pics to, they're not just in between you and that person. There are people at Twitter who enjoy looking at those pics of your unmentionables and then saving them to their own private server. So, as the people say who talk about cybersecurity, it doesn't just go to the cloud. It doesn't disappear off of Snapchat. It goes to the cloud, and then whoever is in charge of that cloud, because people think it's just one nebulous cloud and no one's in charge of it. Of course, there are people in charge of it. That cloud actually resides in a server someplace, and that server is controlled by human beings, and human beings are depraved and indifferent to your personal wants and privacy needs. And many of these depraved individuals hail from different countries. They're not even American citizens. They're H-1B1 visa holders who work here because they have certain skill sets. So they don't understand the concept of privacy, and they don't care a whit about the Constitution. They're not interested in becoming Americans. They're interested in working here for 150 large for Google and Twitter and et cetera, et cetera. And so when they're here and they're reading your DMs, your private messages, looking at all the pictures you send through Snapchat that you think are disappearing after they've been viewed once, but somebody's over somebody's shoulder, taking a screen grab of it with their phone, there is no privacy anymore. Now, of course, there's the expectation of privacy. We still have our constitutional rights. But as far as these companies are concerned, we really have to rethink the way we're approaching that. So we're going to talk to her about that. We have Cassie Smedile, RNC spokesperson. And I actually have her on here talking about the government shutdown and its effects on the state of Missouri and elsewhere. But I also want to talk with her about strategy and how the president was able to, this was supposed to be, according to the interwebs and all the people who supposedly know, this shutdown was supposed to be 15, 20, 30 days. The Democrats were in it for the long haul, but suddenly they came to their senses and decided to let it go. So we'll talk to her about that. Now, I want to talk or listen to, it's OMB Director Mulvaney. And Jim Acosta asked him some questions at the podium. And this is the kind of guerrilla tactics, media tactics that have to be utilized by everyone who's out in front. Everyone, not just RNC spokespeople and staffers, not just people who work for the GOP, not just those who work at the White House, but anyone who encounters these illogical arguments from the Democrats. You have to be prepared to break it down the way Mulvaney is doing right here. And the reason this is so important is because we tend to, we're civilized and, we're not going to engage in that type of talk. There's no reason to get crass. There's no reason to be rude, but you can be direct and you can tell the truth. And in doing so, you make the person who's doing the lying, the person who's trying to present a false narrative, you put them back on their heels and you make them the point of justification. There is no need to justify the fact that the current rules are that you need 60 votes. But if Democrats want to make it about the 60 votes, well, then by all means, use Mulvaney's tactic here in number one.
President Trump is reportedly staying in D.C. until the Senate votes to avoid a government shutdown.
Okay, so we have a little bit of a mix-up. That's the first video on the page, and the video that we're talking about is further down. It's actually the video of Mulvaney, so we'll probably have to come back to that. I want to also kind of preface what's about to be happening with SHOT Show. So if you guys are on Instagram, it's the best place to find the information about SHOT Show. But SHOT Show, so first of all, what is it? A lot of people might be thinking SHOT Show, so okay, it has something to do with guns. Sure, it does. It's 40 years of industry trade conferencing that's done most recently for the past 20 plus years. The conference, or I should say trade show, has been held in Las Vegas, Nevada. So what do we do there? Well, this is my first year going, but I followed the goings on there for the past 3 years or so pretty closely. And basically, it's everything that has to do with the firearms industry. All of those things are on display. So 65,000 square feet of amazing products. So it's not just the guns themselves, it's the accessories. And they're going to be having, like, gunbroker.com is having an auction of a number of really hard to find firearms that you can bid on, like starting now, because the show just started today. Well, the pre-show started today. The show for regular people starts tomorrow. So I'm going to be here with you on the show, on the air tomorrow. And then I'm heading out to Las Vegas so that I can partake of all of this. It's going to be so awesome. Now, what's going to happen there? Oh, no. I didn't silence my devices, guys. Live radio. So what's going to happen there is I'll get to go to a bunch of the press conferences. I'll get to interview a bunch of the people who they're basically industry suppliers. And then the retailers, they'll be there as well. Not just the guns, though. We're talking about the accessories, the extra light fabric that they're now using for body armor, the extra light fabrics they're using for people who are in the professional shooting sports. So there's so much more to it than just the guns, but the guns are the main affair, right? And I'm going to get to see some firearms that really, if you think back to, I don't know if you guys watched it, I know I did, John Wick and John Wick 2, where there's a gun dealer out of California that supplies the firearms for that particular movie series. And there were some guns in that movie that I quite honestly had never seen before. So it's those kind of specialized weapons, customized weapons, and things that I didn't know exist, like internal suppressors for rifles. You can use regular suppressors that are on the exterior. They get screwed onto the end of the muzzle. But what about interior suppression? Didn't know anything about that. So I'm hoping to meet a lot of industry people who would be willing to come on and talk, not from the political perspective so much, but from the industry perspective, because these are the people who not only interface with, they supply and keep supplied our law enforcement people, all of the people who work in any kind of security industry professions, any of that stuff, and then private individuals who use firearms for large types of things. And also, obviously, some country clubs. I mean, if you think about it, there are many, many, many uses for Second Amendment type materials, and the accessories are not just for the gun. So pretty exciting. Now, some of the exhibitors, I'll just give you guys a little taste of, they're going to have a supplier showcase. which is really, really exciting. And that's the showcase of materials suppliers. 2,500 manufacturing-related attendees attended the supplier showcase in 2017. And so there's owners and CEOs, engineers, research and development specialists, and purchasing agents are all of the people who will be partaking in that part of the show. And there's so much more to it. There's a new product center. There's just, I'm so excited. I'm so excited about getting to go. So let's dig into this thing a little bit more. Let's talk a little bit about so the White House infrastructure plan. Apparently it's leaked and stocks are soaring off the end of it. There's a draft White House infrastructure plan that has been leaked, not sure by who. White House spokeswoman Lindsay Walters has said, we're not going to comment on the contents of a leaked document, but look forward to presenting our plan in the near future. And so on here, since it's leaked, and it's on Axios.com, you guys. So sorry, I'm going to read a little bit of it. The funding principles, it talks about core infrastructure projects. It talks about the dates where they're going to have new revenue credits, transformative projects program, making available federal funding and technical assistance for innovative and transformative infrastructure projects based upon a competitive basis to viable projects unable to secure financing through the private sector due to the uniqueness of the program. So innovators, perk up your ears. Looks like they're going to be really receptive to what you have to say. They also have the Department of Commerce chairs administrating the program, states or groups of states, U.S. territories, metropolitan planning organizations. They'll all be able to put in for this type of funding. So I think we're going to see a completely different approach. What's so exciting about it is that from the perspective of a business person, that's what President Trump is, and also a developer, and also someone he's overseen massive construction projects, there's not going to be a gap in what's proposed and the understanding of what's proposed from the perspective of whether or not it's viable and can be accomplished, and whether or not it's wasteful, whether or not the people who are presenting the proposal actually have the wherewithal to see it through to completion, or if the dollars are just going to basically be thrown into cronies, and cronies will take the money and the American taxpayers won't see anything out of it. What am I referring to? The green energy projects. Do you remember all the green energy projects that afterwards Michelle Malkin wrote a book about how the majority of those, it was like solar panel manufacturers and people like that, they got huge amounts of money during the, it was the infrastructure program that President Obama oversaw. And instead of them providing something of service to the federal government and the American people, those companies took the money and then within short order went belly up. We're talking about billions of dollars just basically gone into thin air. I don't expect that to be the case here. And I'm pretty sure if President Trump were to oversee something of that magnitude, something waste of that magnitude, then Michelle Malkin will have her pen and paper ready for another book. I don't think she's going to spare him anything if he doesn't manage this entire project well. And make no mistake about it, the resultant effects of it, whether or not it's successful, that rests with the president. So she's going to be looking at that. I think a lot of people who are big into watchdogging and keeping the government accountable will be looking at that. And I'm excited because I just think it's going to go a lot differently. So when we come back, we'll have Megan Stifel, a Hoover Institute fellow, former cybersecurity policy advisor at the White House National Security Council, and she'll be with us. But after these messages, stay there.
American Family Radio and Preborn are partnering to help save babies' lives throughout America.
Well, my name is Dan Steiner, and I'm the president of Preborn. Ultrasound truly is a game changer. When a mom comes into a pregnancy center under pressure to abort her child. Perhaps the dad's gone, perhaps her mother is pressuring her. Most of the time in her heart she doesn't want to abort, but what she needs is something that will give her the strength to choose life against the pressures forcing her to consider abortion. That's the ultrasound. If she hears her baby's heartbeat and sees that baby on ultrasound, 80% of the time she'll choose life.
Be a compassionate answer to abortion and help save a baby's life. Go to preborn.com now. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
Hello, this is Bishop Harry Jackson of Hope Christian Church in Beltsville, Maryland. Jesus said you would do greater works than he did. Jonah 2, 7 and 8. Jonah chapter 2, 7 and 8 in the NIV version says this: those who cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs. They forfeit the grace that could be theirs. In other words, there is a reservation, there is a confirmation number, there is a credit card on file, but you don't check in. Those who cling to worthless idols forfeit, they don't activate that reservation and its privileges that have already been paid for. Come on now. They forfeit, in one translation, it says they forfeit the hesed. That word is the loving kindness, the tender mercies of God. They forfeit the unmerited favor. They forfeit that which Jesus paid for, that has no requirement of your payment, no ability for you to pay for it. You're like a homeless man that could be staying tonight in the Marriott with all the food taken care of, but you won't show up if you cling to worthless idols. Join us this Sunday morning at 6251 Avondale Road in Beltsville, or on the web at thehopeconnection.org.
Getting at this, you said this was the Schumer shutdown. How can it be the Schumer shutdown when Republicans control the White House, the House, and the Senate?
Come on, you know the answer to that as well as anybody. I mean, I have to laugh when people say that, oh, we control the House, the Senate, the White House, why can't you get this done? You know as well as anybody that it takes 60 votes in the Senate appropriations bill, right? You know that.
I know that.
Okay, so when you only have 51 votes in the Senate, then you have to have Democrat support in order to keep the government, to fund the government. So that's
Okay, so that was Jim Acosta asking some pretty silly questions. Really, he wanted to paint this as something that was the fault of the Republicans. And the messaging out of the White House, all of the different surrogates, the different staffers, different cabinet members who came out and were talking about this, the coordination with the Senate Republicans, their messaging apparatus, their communications department, all of it worked very well. In fact, there was an ad, which we'll be listening to here in the program, which I think was pretty brutal. The Democrats are complicit in the murders of Americans by illegal aliens, and that dovetails in nicely with this desire by the Democrats to open our borders and bring in multiple tens of millions of illegal aliens and give them amnesty. And why do I say multiple tens of millions? Well, we're talking about, first of all, the DACA/Dreamers. They're not 800,000 of them. That's 800,000 who applied. The total number of them that are eligible for this amnesty treatment are 3.6 million plus. Now, take that 3.6 million and multiply it times 10 family members each. And then you get a true picture of the amnesty package they're trying to put forward. Then add in the fact that we've been using the 11 million number 20 plus years, 25 years or so. 25 years we've been telling the American people, we've been hearing from the government, that which doesn't actually have a way of tracking it other than the census, where you voluntarily admit that you're here illegally, and through some of the numbers that come in from the border and border enforcement, which under President Obama was a complete sham. that there are 11 million people here illegally. Now, we know there's the stadium effect. We've talked about that on the program before. In a football stadium, there are multiple entry points. In a baseball stadium, whatever kind of stadium we're talking about here, you have multiple entry points all around the building. And our country is just like that. People don't just come in through the southern border. We have people who fly into this country. You just the same way you would fly here after you go on vacation in Europe. You fly back into the country and you use your passport to get in. They use visas to get in, and those visas have an expiration date. And what those people will do is after the visa expires, they will just remain. The difficulty is in tracking them and finding out, have they stayed or did they leave when they were supposed to? Exactly what mechanism do we use? Apparently, our government doesn't have a mechanism for that. So now add into all of what I've just explained the idea that some people are self-deporting. So some people overstay their visa and then they can't find the kind of work that they want, or they can't find an employer who's willing to employ them with an expired visa, whatever the case might be. Maybe their family back at their home point of origin, they need to get back there. They self-deport. So we have some of that. We also have some people who they come in and out illegally multiple times. So all of these are factors in how we calculate how many people are here. Now you have the Pew Research Center, you have a number of other different independent sources that track how many people are here illegally. But if we've had multiple years, which this is documented through Immigration and Customs Enforcement, where more than 3 million people have entered the country, then you get to a place where, wow, okay, so 3 million a year on 5 or 6 different years. Well, that's more than 11 million people. And remember, there were 11 million people here before that. So there are 40 million blacks in America, right? 40 million. There could be 40 million illegal aliens in this country. Easily. Just think about it. How many have we deported? How many have come in? How do we know? And that represents 58% of the people who are here illegally, the ones who just crossed through the southern border. The remaining 42% are who? Visa overstays from all over the world. So this problem has to be addressed from a common sense perspective, which is what I think we see from President Trump and the Trump administration with the RAISE Act and their attempt to give something, 800,000 legalized through the DACA program, and then in exchange for that, end chain migration. And, so you don't automatically get to bring 10 family members. It doesn't mean you can't bring any. It just means you can't bring automatically 10, just any 10 that you can pick. And it makes it much more our decision on who gets to live here, who gets to be here, in addition to the actual immigrant who's coming in. Okay. So we have a little bit of a mix up with the guest with Demetrius, who books guests for us. So we will be not having Megan Stifel on today. At least that's what it looks like. We're not having her on today. Which brings me to another thing. If you're, and I've kind of talked about this a little bit before, but you can email me at stacyontheright@gmail.com if you're looking for extra income and interfacing with a radio host and learning how to book guests. If you'd like to learn how to do that and earn some money while you're doing it, you should reach out to me via email and we can talk about it, because obviously we love our current guest booker, but he has a fantastic new job with Americans for Prosperity and he's needing a little bit of help. So reach out to me, stacyontheright@gmail.com. And we can talk about whether or not you'd be a good fit for supplementing and assisting Demetrius with guest booking on this nationally syndicated program, which we're expanding, we're growing, and it'll give you a chance to have that much needed skill for producers, which is booking guests. It's a fantastic thing to learn how to do and to have access to our guest list. So you might want to be interested in that. So email me, stacyontheright@gmail.com, if you're interested in helping out with that and being a part of the team. So one of the things that also was really fantastic this weekend was the March for Life. Now, the Women's March, with all the knitted anatomical hats and the vulgarity, that got the majority of the media attention. But at our church, our pastor gave it was amazing. It was an amazing preamble to his teaching session at church on Sunday about he went back to the roots. He talked about how in biblical times, the Israelites and others used to sacrifice their newborn infants on this, basically it was a idol. It was like an animal / person hybrid idol thing. And it was enormous, and it was made out of metal, and they could heat the arms up, and they would put the baby on the heated arms and sacrifice. And they thought that it would give them wealth and prosperity and give them income. And as barbaric as that was, he talked about the Planned Parenthood videos and the fact that we fund Planned Parenthood with American tax dollars and so many other things. And it was an amazing discussion because the pro-life week is not over. So this is school choice week, and we'll get into a little bit of that. And school choice is an issue that I support. I've supported it for years, really. It's one of my earliest things that I kind of jumped on board with and I felt pretty passionately about because I was on school board in a boutique district where a lot of kids want to get into that district, but every school district and public schools, so all the kids can't come from failed districts to those buildings. There's not the space. But there is room in parochial schools, Catholic schools, independent schools, you name it. There are schools out there that would love to take these kids and educate them, but often money is the issue. So anyway, back to the pro-life day. This Saturday down in Jefferson City, we're having our own pro-life rally and march for the state of Missouri, and it is going to be fantastic. We have a wonderful slate of speakers, Reagan Barkledge. We have some people from Students for Life. We also have a bunch of local to the Midwest type people who are going to be speaking, including myself. I'm the keynote, and we're going to be speaking down at the Capitol building. I'm going to be in the rotunda. I spoke there before on another year for a pro-life rally day that they had there, and it was fantastic. I mean, there's nothing like it's the spirit of the people who are a part of the pro-life movement when they're all gathered together in one room and you get to be with them and you get to talk to them and you get to, participate in activities with them. It's just fantastic. So that's happening this Saturday. And there's going to be a march from the church near the Capitol over to the Capitol building. And then we're going to have the speaking on the inside. And praise God, the weather's broken. I hope it holds. We're in the 50s. I was outside today. Instead of going on the treadmill, I was running around outside on our street, walking back and forth up the steep hill and everything else, getting my steps in for today. And so, praise God for that. And that's going to be fantastic. But we're going to talk about perseverance and how in the state of Missouri, we have truly persevered against all odds. Even with a legislature that is heavily Republican, it hasn't always behaved that way. But now they are. Now we have a pro-life governor. Now we have a lot of the pieces falling into place, safety regulations being instituted for these clinics. So women women who are abortion minded are going to have an opportunity not to lose their lives in this decision that they're taking. And the ability of our pregnancy resource centers, which here in St. Louis, we have Thrive STL. They do an amazing job of getting that life affirming message out there and really helping women to choose life for their babies because they provide so much support after the birth of the baby, which that's a huge lie told by the enemy that we only care about babies when they're in the womb. We care about them from natural conception to natural death. And we want to help and be there for these women so that they can be supported and make a choice for life. So it's been pretty awesome. But one of the biggest deals this weekend was that President Trump declared January 22nd National Sanctity of Human Life Day, which is today. He also spoke to the March for Life via closed circuit type thing. He was piped in. And this is a big deal. No other president has ever spoken to or addressed the March for Life. Usually, they're just ignored. And we're talking about millions of people who rallied on the Capitol. Far more people showed up for the March for Life than for the Women's March. And I know during the inauguration and the weeks after, the left had such a field day with President Trump and his audience, this is how many people were there and yada, yada, yada. It matters. It matters because they won't cover it. If they would cover it, then it wouldn't be such a big deal. But why aren't they covering it? Because so many people are pro-life and because we're in the midst of a pro-life generation. People in the age range, a couple generations back from me, we're talking about people in their 20s, people in their early 30s. These are some of the most rabidly pro-life, life-affirming young people we've seen in generations. They've grown up with the ultrasound on the refrigerator door. They've known from day one, there's a baby in my mom's tummy and it's my brother or it's my sister. And they've grown up with that because of technology. And they've come from a place where even if their parents weren't very pro-life, they have a sense that there's something innately wrong with snuffing babies out while they're still growing inside their moms. And so this is amazing. So you've got President Trump declaring January 22nd as National Sanctity of Human Life Day. And so he issued a proclamation. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. I put the link up on Facebook. But he says, today we focus our attention on the love and protection each person, born and unborn, deserves regardless of disability, gender, appearance, or ethnicity. Much of the greatest suffering in our nation's history, and indeed our planet's history, has been the result of disgracefully misguided attempts to dehumanize whole classes of people based on these immutable characteristics. We cannot let this shameful history repeat itself in new forms, and we must be particularly vigilant to safeguard the most vulnerable lives among us. This is why we observe National Sanctity of Human Life Day, to affirm the truth that all life is sacred, that every person has inherent dignity and worth, and that no class of people should ever be discarded as non-human. And so what he's referring to there, part of what he's referring to is obviously, the 60 million abortions that have occurred since Roe v. Wade. That is the equivalent of 18 states worth of people, 18 states of people who've been snuffed out. They've never existed. And he's also talking about the fact that in some European nations, 90% of all you have the amniocentesis and the result comes back and the baby has Down syndrome. 90% of those pregnancies are aborted. And here in this country, the number is pretty high too, but not 90%. So he's wanting us to kind of focus in on this. That's why he's given us a whole day to reflect on it. And, God says in his word, touch not my anointed. And before I formed you, I knew you. I knit you together in your mother's womb. He's very clear about his relationship with us. He is the arbiter of how long our lives are going to be, not us. And so that's why we want to be as careful as we can to be life affirming and to support women and to also fight for the life affirming cause and to fight for the end of taxpayer funded abortion in America through the defunding of Planned Parenthood. So, one of the things that's been under discussion this week and last week, and President Trump even called for it online on social media, was the end of the filibuster. So for appropriations, they've ended it for appointments, but they haven't ended it for appropriations. And what that means is you need 60 votes. If they were to end it, that would take it to a simple majority of 50 plus one, which Vice President Pence could provide that plus one. Senator John McCain, I believe, is out battling the cancer, so he's not voting right now. So you look at that and you say, okay, so why don't they do it? Why don't they just take that action? Well, I was thinking about it this weekend and I was reading some of the background stories, lots of different things kind of dovetailing together. There's this FISA memo, which is supposed to be just, a blockbuster of destruction, exposing corruption and all of that. But there's also the political strategy behind this. And I sincerely believe, based on what I've heard from local politicians and people who kind of are a little bit in the know in some back channel conversations, that the reason why they don't eliminate it is because the Republicans will not always be in power. So at some point, they won't be in power anymore. And they don't want the same type of treatment from the Democrats. The other reason is a little bit more in the strategic area, which is 2018 is upon us. They don't want to give the Democrats something to campaign on. So they're trying to maintain the current order. We'll see if they're able to successfully pull that off or if they need to let it go. When we get back, we'll have more Stacy on the Right for you. So stay right there.
Part of growing in Christ is learning how to encourage others. In doing so, you always gain strength for your own journey. It's kind of like you can't pray for someone in earnest and remain angry at them. You may not like what they've done, but the presence of God has a way of sifting the wrath right out of you. You can't encourage someone else in your walk and remain numb to the encouraging words yourself. As you encourage others, you begin to see that all things are possible in Christ Jesus. Your obstacles become visibly obtainable. In this world of self-centeredness and all about me, be extraordinary. Don't be the norm. Each day, stop and take a me poll to determine just where you are in your walk with the Lord. Encourage your brother or sister in the Lord in that area and watch God do some amazing things in your life. Your deliverance is resting in the power of your tongue. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Tony Johnson. Connect with us at urbanfamilytalk.com.
I'm Charmaine. If I could start my life over again, I would stay as far away from drugs as I could get. I came running to Teen Challenge, and it changed my life.
If you
agrees that the president has been very clear. You've got Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican, saying he hasn't been a reliable partner. You've got Senator Chuck Schumer saying it's like negotiating with Jell-O. Even Senator McConnell says he can't figure out what the president wants.
Then I think maybe sometimes they're not paying attention. Look, the president has laid out what his priorities are and what his principles are. And frankly, he invited George, all of the media in to see and have that discussion. We've laid out that we want to make a deal on DACA. We want to secure the border through the border wall and border security. We want to end chain migration, and we want an end to the visa lottery system. I don't know what's confusing about that. I know that sometimes members like Senator Schumer need a little help and guidance getting through big policy negotiations like that. But the president's laid out what he wants, and if they need help understanding it, we'd be happy to send some people over there to explain it to them.
Do you really want to be questioning Senator Schumer's knowledge of this legislation?
Look, if he's unclear about what the president has laid out, then possibly. I think, frankly and sadly, that Senator Schumer is playing games. Look, he wants to make it like this is the president's fault and that the president hasn't been anything but clear, but he has. We've laid out multiple documents explaining and outlining exactly what we're asking for. Right now, first and foremost, we want to reopen the government. As soon as we do that, we're more than happy to start negotiations on responsible immigration reform. And the Republicans are the only ones that have laid that out and laid it out both in principle from the White House and in legislation by House Republicans.
If the president...
And that's Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Man, I don't understand why they they constantly try to take a run at her when every single time she delivers the smackdown. She never fails. She always knows her stuff. She always has a quick, concise answer. And she was looking very well in that clip. She looked very well, very, very. She's getting comfortable in the role, which I'm really glad to see. She's good at what she does. We need more like her. So yeah, we've got that, and it's kind of interesting that the Democrats tried this tack and now they're backing off of it. But you know, they're going to do what they're going to do. So there was a big press briefing, which actually I believe is just now ending up. And I'm just wondering if people have any idea, if they have any, like if regular everyday Americans who you have to kind of give us credit for paying attention to politics and getting everything else done. If regular everyday Americans saw the results and felt the impact of the shutdown, or if it was kind of like, so what? Because first of all, there's 90% of the government or thereabouts was not impacted. In other words, people are still showing up to work. They're not actually furloughed. They're showing up. They're just working without pay, and then they'll be caught back up on their next paycheck. So you've got that. Most of the things that you would think would be shut down have been declared essential services by previous presidents. So they're going to be still in effect mode. Which brings us to what do Americans care about? And this was a funny piece of audio from a CNN reporter. And they, of course, have talked about Russia the most. They're always talking about Russia, 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 Russia. So she said something that was fascinating about her time spent out among the people, Americans, talking to them about what matters to them, and a little bit about the tax reform bill and how that's really going to flush out. And so it's number 6.
And I think that what's going to be so interesting to watch this year, one of the things that I'm most excited talking to voters about is you are starting to see that uneasiness about the economy sort of dissipate. Remember, even in 2016, when we went out to these swing states and talked to voters, there was still this fear that things were suddenly going to turn down again. You don't feel that as much anymore. And I'm so interested to see how the Russia investigation affects things, because so far out in these districts, when you talk to people about Russia, and that's all we talk about at CNN, basically, they say they don't care. It doesn't have any effect on their lives.
So that's what they're telling her. So she's a CNN reporter. They could say, oh my goodness, yes, Russia. Yeah, that's really important. But in the big scheme of things, and this is where the Democrats really missed the boat. They're able to get voters out during the presidential election. They're able to get people to vote on these types of things on the major, every 4 years, people come out and they're like, we got to stop this racist. But even that is wearing thin. And so there's this, it's out today. And I wasn't exactly sure I was going to talk about it on the show today, but I'm going to have to go ahead and talk about it. So there's first of all, I know if you're watching the show, you can see that I'm black. And I've talked about it a little bit before. I've also talked about the fact that I don't get up in the morning and I say, well, what am I going to do today because I'm black? Or what am I going to do today as a woman? Nobody does that. No one gets up and says, as a white person, what's on my agenda for the day? No one does that. Okay, even Democrats who constantly talk about race don't say that to themselves because it's idiotic and inane. So you've got this black law professor, and the College Fix is reporting this, arguing that African Americans should embrace the notion that being black in America is actually, get this, a disability. That we should do that as a new legal strategy towards enacting protections for the black community against unconscious bias, stereotyping, and structural inequality. So let's unpack those words real quick. Unconscious bias, obviously, is when you're biased against someone, but you're not aware of it. You're mostly doing it out of like a knee-jerk reaction. The same way when you get in your car and you're driving to someplace you've been to a million times, you get there, you really don't think about getting there. You just get in the car and drive, and before you know it, you're there and you get out. It's like you're on autopilot. And so that's what unconscious bias is supposed to be like. I don't deny that it exists. And I don't deny that people have a certain preference for people like themselves. That is actually anthropologically supported. That's statistically supported. People tend to have a a desire to group together in like groups, like themselves. So there, I mean, what are you going to do about that? That's a natural tendency. Stereotyping. Well, here's the sad truth. Stereotyping is rooted in actual facts. So there is a general feeling out in America that Black people tend to be more criminally minded. And that is rooted in the fact that we're 13% of the population, 13.8% at this point, but statistically commit 58% of the crimes. Now, is that 58% of Black people are criminals, or is that a very active minority of people who happen to be Black who are also criminally minded and repetitively commit crimes? It's the latter. So every Black person you encounter is not a criminal, but the statistics point to a higher level of criminality in the Black community. So what are you going to do about that? What about declaring Blacks disabled changes the fact that the stereotypes surrounding Blacks are rooted in some truth? So that's not going to help. And then you have this new term, something coined by the Democrats, structural inequality. Okay. So structural inequality, as defined by Wikipedia, is defined as a condition where one category of people are attributed an unequal status in relation to other categories of people. This relationship is perpetuated and reinforced by a confluence of unequal relations in roles, functions, decisions, rights, and opportunities, as opposed to cultural inequality, which focuses on the individual decisions associated with these imbalances. Structural inequality refers specifically to the inequalities that are systemically rooted in the normal operations of dominant social institutions and can be divided into categories like residential segregation or healthcare, employment, and educational discrimination. So I'm going to go back to my little favorite piece here. This little thing's going to be wore out by the time I finish, I promise. And remember, we've been reading and talking about Nikki Johnson Huston Esquire's piece in Huffington Post. She says her last objection to white privilege and the conversation surrounding it is that it teaches the message to our young people that we need white people to give up something for Black people to achieve, which is the garbage you just heard there with this structural inequality. I don't deny the existence of structurally unequal opportunities, structurally unequal responses to Black people as compared to Hispanic people and Asian people, et cetera, et cetera. I don't deny that exists. What I deny is that it is the utter responsibility of white people to be vilified and to somehow be punished and lose something in order to eliminate it. So Nikki Johnson Huston's grandmother told her, if we work hard and make good decisions, it matters. She said, her grandmother said, I wouldn't always get what I deserved, but I would get what I earned. She told me life wasn't fair. She acknowledged that it would be more difficult as a poor Black girl in America, but she also told me if I worked hard and got a good education, I could live a life that was beyond my imagination. And then we have the liberals who are telling us in no uncertain terms that if we work hard and make good life decisions, it still won't matter because we're Black. Then how do you account for President Obama? How do you account for Oprah Winfrey? How do you account for millions of Black people in America today who are wildly successful, because they made good decisions? Also, inherent in this worldview is the idea that as Black people, somehow the laws of nature and what God has promised us in the Bible, these things don't apply to us. And I really vehemently oppose that mantra. It has been successfully forced out into the public sphere to such a degree that a lot of Black people literally think, well, I'm going to pray about this, but I'm Black, so, it's not going to work. I know I'm praying about this and I'm believing God for it, but then they get to work. They think their boss doesn't like them, so they're not performing. They're not showing up on time. They're not doing whatever it is that needs to be done to get the job done. So there are people out there who can stop you from getting things that you want. Had it happen to me. I am utterly aware of certain individuals who have worked against me to stop me from getting something that I feel like I earned. But does that mean that it's because of them that I didn't get it? Or is it because that's not what God has for me? I tend to think it's the second. They may give themselves credit for not giving it to me or not, that didn't happen for you. But I tend to believe that God has something better for me, something that's more in line with what my trajectory is that he has for me. I tend to believe that much more than I believe that some person who decided, you know what, I just don't want to work with her. And that's the reason why I'm not doing this or that or what have you. In the moment, my flesh rises up and says, look what, you know why that happened. But in my prayer closet and in my moments where I'm asking for wisdom and asking for, Lord, help me understand this, I come to know that God has something else for me. So if you're a part of the Christian worldview, it doesn't matter if you're black. What matters is that you work as unto the Lord. So it doesn't matter how many of these fantastic articles are written by these interesting people. It doesn't matter how many people of, PhDs and people who spent their entire lives in academia who sit around and come up with these really interesting, like well thought out. It took years of research for them to come up with that definition of structural inequality. We don't live by these rules. We pass through this place. This is not our home. We serve a God who's bigger than all of that. What does he say? What does God say about our circumstances? He says right here in Ephesians that he will do exceedingly, abundantly, above all that we ask or think. He's able to do it. According to the power which works in us, the Holy Spirit. To him be glory in the church by Christ Jesus to all generations forever and ever. Amen. So you either believe that or you believe this structural inequality mumbo jumbo. There is a cultural rot that has taken hold of the black community. It even now surfaces out through black liberation theology in churches. It's in the schools. It's the thing that says to you, the person that says to you, the white liberal that says to you, the well-meaning, politically agnostic person who says to you, well, you're black. It's going to be that much harder for you. And if you are a Christian and you buy that, you're accepting the lies of the enemy as truth. God says you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. But it doesn't mean God's our genie and all we have to do, well, Lord, I really want to do this. And so thank you so much for answering my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. And pray that 6 times and all of a sudden you're going to get an email. No, prayer is a process. We have to work out our faith. We have to hold to what we believe God has for us. He says he gives us the desires of our heart. Then we pray and we ask him to help us fulfill those, which is a process. There is no magic bottle that you can rub or a certain number of times you can say a prayer. The Bible says pray without ceasing. We are to believe and not doubt. We're to keep on knocking. If you're a Christian, this kind of talk has no place in your vernacular. You either believe God's word says what it says and you believe he's right here, right now, answering your prayers, or you believe in unconscious bias and structural inequality. But you can't have both of those things in the same brain. I choose Christ. I choose to know that he has what he has for me and no man can take it from him. Which means I just have to keep working. That's it. All the rest of this is mumbo jumbo meant to drag you down. We'll be back with hour 2 after these messages.
Urban Family Talk.
Hey, I'm Miki, co-host of Aaron the Addisons on Urban Family Talk. I want to invite you to be part of our online chat community we've affectionately called The Churbin. While you listen to your favorite programs, you have the opportunity to communicate in real time with the hosts of those programs and other Urban Family listeners. Find out what the talk is all about. Become a Churbinite at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Senate leaders have reached an agreement to reopen the government. Democrats have yielded and ended their delaying tactics against a bill financing federal agencies through February 8th. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says in exchange, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has agreed to begin debating immigration by that date. Schumer credited the efforts of leaders in helping to craft a final deal, and criticized the White House for not doing more to help broker a deal.
While this procedure will not satisfy everyone on both sides, it's a way forward. I'm confident that we can.
It's pure evil. President Trump is right. Build the wall. Deport criminals. Stop illegal immigration now. Democrats who stand in our way will be complicit in every murder committed by illegal immigrants. President Trump will fix our border and keep our families safe.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Okay, so that was an ad that the president has put out that has Democrats, they are hopping mad about it. They are unhappy. They just don't understand what's going on. Or I should say, they do understand it. They just don't like it. They don't like that President Trump hits back. So when they get to putting their narratives out there and we're all looking and we're like horrified and shocked at what they're doing, then they come back in and they kind of follow up with the 1-2 punch because they've got the media on their side. And what President Trump is doing is saying, yeah, you have the media, but I have Twitter. You have the media, but I have the White House switchboard. He put that message on the White House switchboard. You know how many tens of thousands of calls go into the White House switchboard on a daily basis? And that's the message that everybody got. If you were calling to tell President Trump how you didn't like how he shut the government down and you got that message, you had to listen to that. And wait a minute now. I've been told that the shutdown was the Republicans' fault. And this message says that's not true. Yeah, that's what's going on. So I'm glad about the president actually taking the time to punch back. I want to give you the rest of the details on this, and I did post it on the Stacy on the Right show page. In case you're just tuning in, welcome to Stacy on the Right here on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. Call lines are open at 866-963-2037. So we're talking about Kamani Paul Emile, and she's an associate professor of law at Fordham University and associate director of its Law School Center on Race, Law, and Justice, which, do we need that? Okay, whole nother show. I'm not even going to get into it. She argues that while African Americans might initially spurn the blackness as a disability label, it can actually be a wise courtroom plan. Paul Emile argues that being disabled does not have the same extreme negative connotation as it did in the past. What's more, disability law does not force plaintiffs to show that the harm that they've suffered was intentional. Its discriminatory effect is almost always enough. Rather than focusing on malicious intent, disability law accepts the impact of even neutral actions, policies, and programs, directly confronting the ways in which social structures, institutions, and norms can substantially limit a person's ability to perform a major life activity. It thus requires that even discrimination based on unacknowledged bias be addressed. As she has a forthcoming piece in the Georgetown Law Review, which was excerpted by Fordham Law News. I'm sorry. I thought, yeah, I'm not done here. So here's the problem. Here's the problem. So let's say you are, I don't know, let's take my situation. You're working out and you're eating right and you're looking for some results and those results are not forthcoming. Okay. So you're working out, you're eating right, you're off the sugar, you haven't had a soda in 3 years. You're doing all the stuff that you're supposed to do, and the results that other people are getting, you're not getting, okay? So you have a couple of options. You can keep going because maybe it's going to take longer for you for whatever reason. Is it fair? No, but maybe it's just going to take longer. You can, number two, say, okay, this isn't working for me, so there must be something wrong that I'm doing, and readdress all the different things that you're doing. Look at it. Am I really paying attention to my calorie intake? Am I really working out for the number of minutes that I need to work out per day? Am I really applying myself to, getting enough sleep and making sure my hormones are balanced? Am I doing everything I need to do? You could also say to yourself, this doesn't work for me. It's the fault of someone else. It's the fault of this diet plan. It's the fault of this treadmill. It's the fault of this scale. The scale doesn't work. You could also say, other people are losing weight and they're white. I'm black and I'm not losing weight. So obviously, this has to do with racism. Now, the last thing you could do is you could say, I'm disabled. I have some kind of disease. I'm, permanently this weight. It's a disability that I have, and I need other people to accommodate me. So only two of those ways that I just listed off will yield any tangible results. I could say other people are losing weight and they're white, and therefore this is a structural bias against me. But will I eventually end up losing weight if I simply stop at blaming other people for what's going on? Same thing with the one before that. There is no way to continue the weight loss process if I stop mid-process and say, this isn't working for me because of, and then stop there. Now, the first two ways, the first way, just continue to work out and eat right and wait for, the body to catch up, or reevaluate all the things that are being done and maybe tweak some things, change some things. But in other words, look to the issues, look to the remedies that you have available to you. Those first two things at least enable me to continue the process and to move forward. So if we apply this analogy to the larger way of living, way of being, if you are Black in America and you're not making it and you feel like it's structural inequality that's keeping you back, if you just stop there and say, white people are making it, I'm not making it, it's inequality, that's what I'm going to, that's it. Will you make it? Will you advance past the place where you make that declaration? If that's all you're going to do, no, you will not. So there is no way for this woman's, so let's say this actually works and Black people start to declare themselves as disabled. Well, the other side of that coin is that there are some jobs that disabled people can't do. So while there are protections for disabled people, there is also a baseline that we all know there are some jobs that people who are disabled cannot perform. Now, the number of jobs they can perform is ever expanding due to technology and different accommodations that can be made, and that's fantastic. But there are some jobs that disabled people can't do. There are some things they cannot do. So is that what we want for Black people? There'll be certain things, if Blacks are declared automatically disabled, just being Black is a disability, then that means whole sections of our society, things that we could do, will be off limits to us because as a disabled person, you won't be able to perform those things. There's always there's a yin to the yang, as the people say. There's a consequence. There's an unintended consequence. There's always something that these liberals, in their short-sighted desire to make equal outcomes for everyone, that they ignore. There's always something that they're like, oh, all we got to do is Blacks are disabled. Okay, so Black people can't do X. Then they'll be like, well, that's racism. No, you said Blacks were disabled. So which is it? Are all Blacks innately disabled? And what about those of us who don't want to be disabled? What about those of us who are saying, I don't believe in this stuff? What do they do about us? Probably they'll say you're not Black. I mean, so this doesn't make any sense. So she calls it harnessing a new paradigm to use the courts to require some sort of structural reforms that benefit the Black community against what she contends is the limited opportunity Blacks face today due to unconscious bias, stereotyping, and structural inequality. And that may be true that there are limitations on what Blacks can do. In fact, I would dare say I've met people who've said to me, oh, wow, how long have you been doing that? And they've explained to me that I'm the first Black person they've ever known to do that. And so I usually think to myself, you got to be kidding me. But there are going to be people who are this is their first go round. So, but does that mean that Blacks are disabled by that? I say no, not in America. There was an article out last week where this person who in college, he went and did missions in Sierra Leone. And he learned about African culture there. And the culture is run by women. The women do all the work. They have backbreaking labor. And it's a multiple wife type scenario where the husbands basically sit around under trees and they're fed by the women. And the women feed everyone, the children, everything else. And family is of the utmost importance. So you have 100 people in your family or so, your extended family. And everything you do is to make sure that you give to them. And if you get anything, you have to make sure that you get enough for your family because you have to share it with them, all 100 of them. And so everything there is corruption and cronyism. And there is no advancing without advancing your entire family. And so everyone's equally poor. And this person talked about working there on this, kind of missions type basis and living there for 4 months doing this work. And I'm astounded by the descriptions that he made about just the culture. Public defecation is the norm. No discernible, like the kind of stuff we expect. In America, it's not just that we don't use the restroom on sidewalks. It's that we expect people to clean themselves and not present themselves in public, where your body odor is offending other people. We expect people to be clean and to keep their residences clean at very minimum on the outside. And we expect it to be clean enough on the inside so that it doesn't create a health hazard and cause the building to become condemned. There's so much that we take for granted here that we just assume every other country is just like ours. But they're not, which is why President Obama and President Trump use those colorful terms to describe countries outside of what our normal paradigm is. And so in the face of all of that, in the face of knowing that Blacks in America, we've accomplished some amazing things, then you have this, where you have a college-educated Black woman who works in the university environment, someone who has tenure and respect and has achieved a modicum of success herself, declaring that people who aren't successful, it's not their own fault. It's not decisions that they've made, because those are the kind of statements that are bigoted and hard to hear. You don't want someone telling you the reason why you're not doing well is that you keep making really idiotic decisions. Nobody likes to hear that. When's the last time someone said that to you? Has it ever been said to you? You made a bad choice here. You made a bad decision. And this is something that anybody can hear. I know white people hear it from their family members and people that they work for. I know Black people hear it. I know every successful person I know has heard before, you've got to start making some better decisions. So you have two choices at that point. You can either say, nah, you're a racist, or you can say, wow, so this isn't working out because of these decisions. Now, sometimes that not working out means it's just over. The relationship's over. The working thing is over and you have to move on. Other times it's being told to you so you can make some changes so you can hang around. But in any case, a person who's willing to tell you that truth, that you need to make some better decisions, is really looking out for you. They're like a messenger from God coming to tell you that you're making bad decisions. And if you want to see something better, you're going to have to change. That's actually so unpopular right now. To tell people, whether they're Black or white or men or women, it is so unpopular to say you made bad decisions. Look at the Me Too women's movement. The idea that certain women like Diane von Furstenberg, who, she put it pretty crudely, but she told the truth. Women in Hollywood don't wear any clothes. They should get dressed. I've said here on the program on numerous occasions, women should not meet men in their hotel rooms for business meetings. No. You should not accompany a man to his private residence, a man you've just met. You should not have a man you've just met come to your home or apartment or condo or whatever you're working with. He shouldn't be at your house on the first date. He shouldn't even know where it is. How do you even know what he's like? Okay, you met him at church. Great. Y'all still need to go back to your place? Look, this isn't the movies. So saying that's really unpopular. I've already been told, oh, you're just, I don't expect anything better from you. You're a right winger. Like having common sense is a right wing commodity. What do parents tell their daughters? At least they used to say, well, nothing good happens outside the house after midnight. Now that's old school. That's really old school. Nowadays, parents say, don't make decisions that you wouldn't make if I was standing there in the room with you, which means that kind of inhibition you feel when you know you're being watched by your parents. That's a safety mechanism. Deploy that. So it's unpopular to say to somebody, the reason why your life sucks is because you keep having children out of wedlock, you don't have a job, and you refuse to do anything to improve your skill set. That's racism. And so what she wants to do is make those kinds of behaviors into a disability so no one can ever say anything bad about them. We know that's wrong. She's wrong, and the idea is wrong. All right, when we get back, we are going to have Cassie Smedile of the RNC. Stay right there.
outside of the lines, and we paint a picture.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Thanks for tuning in on Facebook and YouTube, and for following us all over the place. We're switching over. I'll go ahead and make the announcement now. We're switching over to the weekly newsletter format at stacyontheright.com. So you'll get one email a week if you sign up. So head on over and subscribe if you'd like to see what that looks like. I'm working really hard to bring you something that's not only visually appealing, but news and information packed, and something where you're getting some content that I'm not posting anywhere else. So that'll be coming from Stacy on the Right. The newsletter format once a week on Sunday afternoons, one email per week, which will make it easier for you to be able to withstand the onslaught. I notice when I sign up for something from a certain store in order to get their 10% off, then I start getting 4 and 5 emails a day. So I know what it feels like. You instantly want to unsubscribe, but you don't want to miss. So you're trying to figure out what to do. So we're going to take care of that over at stacyontheright.com by giving you the weekly newsletter format. So you'll only get one post per week, one email per week with all of the posts in it, everything you've missed. Then anything else you're looking for, you can just always type in stacyontheright.com and it'll take you right over there. So welcome back to the program. We're going to take a quick call and then get to our guest from the RNC. I believe we have Jess from Ohio. Thank you for calling Stacy on the Right.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Thank you for taking the call.
Sure.
Hi, I only had one simple question. With all of the global debate over immigration and things of that nature of dreamers, and then them going as far as shutting down the government for this, my question is, I always was taught and teach my kids growing up that the government is elected to take care of the citizens of America. My question is this. At what point did it become more important for them to take care of people who have shown complete disrespect for the law by breaking it than the people who live here legally and are supporting it?
Okay. Well, I'll answer your question. Thank you so much for calling into the show. I appreciate your time today and your ears listening into the program. I don't think it really is that big of a calculation. It's more like, which of these people will bring in more voters? Where can we get a steady stream of people who will not question our policies and will vote for us as long as we give them citizenship? And that calculation has been made by the Democrats, and they've calculated well. So right now it's my pleasure to welcome Cassie Smedile, National Press Secretary and spokesperson for the RNC. Cassie, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, hey, Stacy, great to be back with you.
You know, I find the developments since we last spoke to be almost stunning in the missile-type accuracy that we've seen from the president. He identified the target. They called his bluff and said, we're not going to give you what you want. We're going to shut the government down. He said, go ahead. And then he put that message up on the White House switchboard so everybody knows whose fault it was. And even the media has been saying that the Democrats chose poorly this time. And now, all of a sudden, the shutdown's over.
I know, isn't it incredible? It's funny because Chuck Schumer tried to say on the floor of the Senate today, the president's been absent from the negotiations. No, you have it spot on. The president knew what he was doing all along, and that's because, as we've discussed before, the president has this unique and keen ability to keep his thumb on the pulse of the will of the American people. And he knew, he didn't need the polls that came out, some of them just today, he knew that while, yes, Americans do want something to be done about our broken immigration system, that tying the funding of the government to DACA, which doesn't run out for another month and a half, was a completely manufactured crisis on the part of the Democrats and not where the majority of Americans thought that conversation should happen. And so he held the line. He held strong. He told his staff. The Republican conference kept it all together. And then today, the Democrats ended up having to, the only thing that changed from Friday to today was their votes. There was nothing changed in the offer on the table because the offer on the table was reasonable from the very beginning.
It really was. It was much more reasonable than I would have offered, Cassie. I mean, and I don't understand the political realities. Let's not play. I'm a radio host. I'm not in Washington, D.C. I'm not getting the briefings. You know what I mean? And that being said, I wouldn't have offered them 800,000, DACA recipients given amnesty. I wouldn't have, but they did. And so it just goes to show you how much further they're willing to go to get this deal done. And it's worth it for the Democrats to consider it because chain migration is going away, whether it gets done as a part of DACA or it gets done later under some other reform package. We have to do away with it because it's detrimental to the country.
That's right. And to be clear, Mitch McConnell said that it is his intention to take up DACA, but we're going to make sure that that's still done on the right terms. That's coupled with good immigration reform so that we don't find ourselves here time and time again, just has been the case the last 25, 30 years. We can't just do a permanent fix for DACA and not touch anything else, because then DACA persists. We have to fix our broken immigration system. And one thing I think must be pointed out, I actually saw this on Bill Maher's program on HBO, which, no friend of the right, but he pointed out just how far away from reality Democrats are on the immigration issue. So far that they are to the left of our socialist friends up in Canada. Their immigration policy is merit-based. They don't have chain migration, or at least far, far smaller percentage. And yet our Democrats down here in our Congress, Democrats down here in our Congress, they just want amnesty. You're right. They try and say that it's about these little logical things. But if it was really just about DACA and the Dreamers, we would have had this solved a long time ago, maybe like when Barack Obama was president and the Democrats were in charge of the House and the Senate. But they didn't want to do it then, because the real truth of the matter is that they just want amnesty. They don't actually want logical immigration reforms to fix our broken system.
They don't, Cassie. And I've been talking about kind of the there's a strategy to it, obviously, and it's a numbers game for them. So we're talking about, so you got the 800,000 who applied for DACA, but the real number of Dreamer DACA people is 3.6 million. Well, 3.6 million, and each of those gets to bring in 10 relatives because they don't want the end of chain migration. Now we're talking about more than the total number of illegal immigrants that they told us there were, which leads me to believe that there are possibly 30 or 40 million illegal aliens in this country. Now, I don't have the proof for that, but they don't have the proof that it's only 11 million. Nobody has any proof of anything except who's applied.
Right, absolutely. And that is exactly why we have to get to the core, the root of this problem first, which is resolving our broken immigration system. And having to do with that is fixing some of these loopholes so that you incentivize people to come out of the shadows. We are fine with setting up a system where people have to go through the process. We are not fine with a system that continues to allow people to come here, live in the shadows, while all the while still taking advantage of the American government and the American economy. We want you here contributing to the economy, not taking advantage of it.
Yeah. So this is the conversation so you and I can have this conversation. And I wish that this kind of conversation could be had on MSNBC, because we have people inadvertently, you turn on the MSNBC for a minute while you're preparing the breakfast for your kids or what have you. And the discussions over there are, well, the Republicans are xenophobic and they're scared of immigrants. Cassie, have you ever been afraid of an immigrant, a legal immigrant? We're talking about people who just go through the process and they come here and they tell you, oh, my original home country is, Czechoslovakia or Nigeria. And then you're like, oh, nice to meet you. How long have you been an American citizen? Have you ever felt fear in that moment? Do you run from people who say that? I mean, what happens with us so-called fear-mongering? We're scared of immigrants. I'm not xenophobic. I just want comprehensive immigration reform that means we go back to our common sense.
Absolutely. One of my most favorite moments of the year is on 4th of July, when they always show the citizenship ceremonies for all of those hundreds of legal immigrants who have been going through the process, and they swear their oath to the United States. It's just an amazing, stirring, patriotic moment. And do you know what those people become? Some of the most ardent advocates for legal immigration, because they came here to do it. They are here to adapt to American life and to live their American dream as Americans. They have no patience for the people who are trying to jump the line or skirt the system altogether. And those are the people I've talked to. I just had an Uber driver the other day who was studying for his citizenship test. We had the most wonderful conversation, and I bet I'd be hard-pressed to find a more patriotic person than that man. And I am happy to have those people here who want to be here, and they want to contribute to the American dream and have their own American dream. And I think that's a highly popular opinion. And to your point, the minority opinion is what you hear blabbing on MSNBC all day long. That's just not the conversations that people are having in everyday America.
Yeah, I had the same experience with an Uber driver. He was like, oh, I've been in this country for just a few months, and I'm going for my citizenship test. I mean, this was a couple years ago. I was in D.C. I was coming from my parents' house down to the NRA TV studios, and I caught an Uber, and I had my little bag with me because I was going to the airport after that. And he came pick me up. I get in, go, and we start riding along, and he just, he was like, do you live here? And I was like, no, I live in St. Louis, but I'm here for work, and my parents live here, so I always stay with them. And he said, I love this area. I've only been here a few months, and I'm going to be a citizen. I'm going to be just like you. And I was like, that's awesome. I did not say pull over. I'm scared. I'm getting out. And I was like, that's great. We just chatted a little bit. He drove me where I was going. I paid him. So I don't know how they're getting away with this, but I do think that the coordination that I saw, because I was watching, Cassie, between the RNC, the GOP, McConnell's communication staff, the White House, the president, the tweets, this was a well-coordinated movement that started the minute the Democrats forced the shutdown. The entire apparatus went into play. Am I going to see more of this with the ensuing, because you've got the infrastructure bill that's going to be up next? Are we going to see the same coordination and kind of winning that we've got going on? Because I'd love to see it again.
Absolutely. And that is music to my ears that you noticed all of that coordination. It really started with that Schumer shutdown. Once it was actually one of Speaker Ryan's staffers who came up with that, and everybody just glommed onto it. And you heard Director Mulvaney saying it in the press conference the next day, and it was going through all of our everything. We were putting out all of our content and tweets and all of that. But we did this for tax reform, and it was obviously successful. We did it again here on the shutdown. And, of course, you'll see it throughout every piece of President Trump's legislative agenda coming up over this next year. And, of course, going into the midterm elections with hopefully a great, strong slate of candidates all across the country, they will have that coordinated effort on their side. Because that's what we have to do to combat against the mainstream media, against Democrats, against Hollywood. They've got everybody on their side. And to see that the American people, once again, just like in 2016, their will prevailed here. And Chuck Schumer, in particular, those Democrats in red states who are up for re-election this year, of course, we know in Missouri, which is my home state and yours, Claire McCaskill, they've got a real tough time because their leadership completely led them astray and against the will of their constituents on this shutdown.
They did. And notice Claire, who is usually a reliable vote with, the hierarchy of the Democrats, she voted for the funding resolution. She was like, I can't be caught. I'm on the chopping block. So she was acting very responsibly this time. But I hope people don't buy that. Missourians, don't buy that. That was just a political play on Claire's part.
Just playing politics. I know, but you know it's bad, and you know they feel vulnerable when even Claire McCaskill, you get some of the more moderate ones, Donnelly and Manchin and stuff, they're always playing both sides of the coin. But you're right, Claire is just constantly with her leadership. She loves her leadership. And for her to say, I don't know about this last Friday, that tells you just how bad of a decision this was, how big of a miscalculation it was. And we, for our part of the RNC, have folks on the ground, and we have a coordinated effort underway to make sure that people remember in November what the Democrats were trying to do and how they held 300 million American people hostage to look out for 700,000, 900,000, depending which number you believe, non-American citizens, illegal immigrants. And we're going to make sure the American people don't forget that in November.
Well, don't worry. I was tweeting on the Schumer shutdown hashtag. As soon as I saw it, I was like, I'm in. And I'm also going to be right here with you. You got people on the ground. I'm in on the effort to make sure that we kiss Claire goodbye. She's got so much money, and she's got grandkids and really a very full life. And I'd love to see her head back into the private sector. And we can have, who is our guy? Oh, Josh Hawley, who I believe will win the primary easily. And hopefully he'll ascend to the Senate, and that'll be a good conservative vote and voice in the Senate on behalf of Missourians to join Roy Blunt.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's time for Claire's next chapter. And although we don't get into primaries here, just very personally taking off my official hat, Josh Hawley is somebody that my family has known for a number of years, back to when he was in high school, and I just don't think we could be served by anyone better. But that's me taking off my official hat. That's just totally a personal connection.
we will consider that to be the personal preference of Cassie, not the RNC. But I'm excited. Yes. I was really, honestly, Cassie, I've been looking for what I saw last week from everybody, including the RNC. I've been looking for that, and I was very happy to see it, and I'm energized by that. And I think for voters out there who are wondering, what it looks like behind the scenes, we got a peek into that last week when we saw all of those different arms kind of mobilized together in unison. And I loved Mulvaney's comments. I loved Sarah Huckabee Sanders out there pounding. She pounded those reporters' little heads into the ground. And there were others who were just so effective at messaging what was really happening, because we don't have the media, so we have to use whatever else we can get our hands on. And they did a great job. So we need more of that. And I'm excited about the prospects. If we're going to actually fight, then we're going to win. And I'm happy about that.
Well, I have to say that means a lot coming from you, because I know you and so many others have been just such great advocates and forces for good on the ground. And for so long, we've had different voices coming out of Washington, and we can't quite always get our message together, so that, A, we were able to get our message together on this, but B, that you heard that and that you all are feeling like you've got the support you need to continue spreading your message. That's good momentum for us as we head into this fight in 2018.
I'm excited. Okay, so when I saw your name on the list today, I'm like, yes, this is going to be great, because look, they're caving. So, Cassie, we'll talk again soon. We'll just keep working. And thanks so much for what you're doing over at the RNC.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Have a good week, and talk to you soon.
You too. All right, we'll be back with more right after these messages. Stay there.
And my father, your great-grandfather, fought in World War II.
Really?
He was a gunner on the big ship out in the Pacific Ocean.
Wow.
Your great-grandmother did her part, too.
Was she on a ship?
Oh, no. She stayed back home. She and a lot of her friends worked really hard in a factory because the men had gone off to war.
Ooh.
And they held scrap metal drives to help in the war effort. The folks back home were heroes, too.
Here at the American Family Association, we consider you the heroes back home. As you fulfill your responsibility of caring for your family day to day, your partnership with us is crucial as we fight the enemies of freedom in America. Thank you for your commitment to the American Family Association.
Grandpa, what's a scrap metal drive?
Let's get some cookies, and I'll tell you all about it.
Coming next week on The Dwelling Place, Pastor Al Pittman continues to walk us through the Bible, line by line and verse by verse, to let God show us just how timeless His truth is. That's next week on The Dwelling Place.
The church has to take the lead in ensuring that men are properly trained for fatherhood. We have an epidemic in which boys are not growing up with their fathers. So as Christian men, we have to stand in the gap and make up the hedge so that our communities are not destroyed. When we see fatherhood as a blessing and not an inconvenience, we will see children as spiritual weapons in our arsenal. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
Life is never picture perfect. Human beings come in all different shapes, sizes, colors, and abilities. No matter how much we plan, no matter how much we think we're prepared, the unplanned happens all the time. It's how we respond to the unexpected that shows our true humanity. But many do not see the value of every human life. Too many are willing to discard those who don't fit the picture of perfection. Abortion destroys the chance to love and to be loved. We never know what will fill the frames of our lives, or how empty those frames can be when we allow exceptions.
Every life is a gift.
Learn more at www.radiance.life.
I don't need no strangers to be washed in His blood.
Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. If you've been paying attention lately, you may have noticed that President Trump doesn't like the media, and the media fervently don't like him back. It is a hate-hate relationship, and it seems to be getting more contentious by the day. Consider CNN's headline just this morning. So the president, you saw yesterday, got a strikingly positive health evaluation. Here was CNN's take on it. Quote, overweight and doesn't exercise. In other words, doctors say he's fine, CNN calls him fat. This has been going on since the very beginning. Except for the day that he lobbed cruise missiles into Syria, which delighted official Washington, as it always does, virtually all of Trump's press coverage has been negative. Reporters don't simply disagree with the administration on policy, though they do. They feel personal contempt and loathing for the president, and their bosses have encouraged them to express it. In return, the president has struck back, dismissing the media as fake news. In many cases, he's been right. In others, he's just attacked news he doesn't like, just like all politicians do. Now, under normal circumstances, part of the remedy for this would be a responsible media establishment. Reporters would raise their standards and run fewer false stories. But these are not normal circumstances. Suddenly, there's a massive and eager audience for conspiracy theories. And that is exactly why they're going 24/7 with this Russian nonsense on some of the other networks. It is very lucrative for them. But there's another reason, too. In the America of 2018, victimhood is power. Instead of improving their journalism, it's easier for reporters to complain about how their voices are somehow being suppressed. The irony, of course, is that free expression really is under attack in this country at the moment, but most journalists don't seem to care or even notice it. Heterodox views are shouted off campus and often threatened with violence. Twitter routinely bans accounts for expressing viewpoints its executives oppose. Google tampers with its search results secretly to hide ideas it doesn't like and then fires employees who express those ideas. And yet, weirdly, the media applaud all of this. They are not defenders of free expression. They are guardians of orthodoxy, elite orthodoxy. Today, Republican Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona took their side. In a speech on the Senate floor, Flake compared Trump's criticism of the media to the Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin, one of history's most prolific mass murderers, because, of course, barking at Jim Acosta during a press conference is a lot like building death camps or staging a famine in Ukraine.
So there's nothing better than Tucker Carlson dismantling your arguments. And I saw some praise from the Never Trump contingent for Jeff Flake's speech. And if you missed it, you missed nothing. His comparisons are spurious and without merit. And, there's room for us to criticize the president. There's room for us to even castigate some of the behaviors that we've seen. And it's really, those are personal decisions. But we have to, sound the alarm and raise the stop sign when we hear people comparing their political opponents to despots and murderers, killers, thugs, the kinds of people who sent people to gulags and tortured them to death, that are responsible for the deaths of multiple tens of millions of people. I'm sorry. And don't tell me he's on his way there, or that he talks like those people, or that he thinks like those people. President Trump is no relation, no directionally, on the road to anything near Hitler or Stalin or any of those. They were evil men. So I thought Tucker Carlson did a fantastic job there. And now it's my pleasure to welcome, we have our wonderful opportunity to have someone on who is a fellow at the Hoover Institution, Megan Stifel. She was also former cybersecurity policy advisor to the White House National Security Council. Megan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So I know you have a paper on regulators in what's called Siberia. Let's talk about that.
Sure. So the paper is a product that the Federalist Society put together. We published it last summer. And essentially the gist of it is that as we undertake a review of the regulatory space, in particularly around technology issues, it's clear that we, among many spaces, that's a very difficult area in which to develop and implement meaningful regulations. Among other things, they often can lead to constrained innovation and investment in issues that are really driving our new digital economy, but they can also have a negative impact when not carefully considered. And the paper goes on to offer a couple of examples, one of which is the issue of, for example, regulations around the Americans with Disabilities Act have unfortunately had the negative result of colleges and universities removing coursework from the internet. One example of that is the university is UC Berkeley. Rather than potentially facing fines for not being compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act, they've actually taken down a number of, I can't exactly remember how many hours worth of free classes that were offered available online because they were not compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So certainly, when it does not, the point there is not to say that we shouldn't have the opportunity for all citizens to use and have accessible use of the internet, but to say that we need to be very careful in ensuring that regulations are carefully thought through and don't have a negative net impact.
Okay. So that's one of the ones that we can kind of understand, where they take something off or remove something that was accessible to everyone, but regulation-wise did not comply. And I'm assuming part of the reason why they didn't comply with the regulation is that it was too onerous, or it was too difficult for them to bring themselves into compliance to?
That, but also, in fact, because the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in the 90s, the regulations are unclear and were written in a time where the internet was not something that we held in our hands, let alone where everyone had in their home. So in this case, the regulations are so vague as to be, in some sense, almost obviously not meaningless, because they probably would not exist anymore. But the Department of Justice has been promising some guidance to help companies understand what their obligations under the ADA are when it comes to accessible websites. But that guidance is still not forthcoming, and instead, there have been a number of lawsuits that have been filed by a lot of plaintiffs' attorneys who have unfortunately taken advantage of this ambiguity, and in some ways not always in a beneficial manner. But they are highlighting the fact that an example of an area where regulatory action can really have a negative impact, both for corporations and also for the average user.
So what we're looking for here is, because the technology moves so quickly, is possibly just the rescinding of a lot of these regulations that are basically indecipherable for the people that they're intended to kind of regulate, and in the place of that, to possibly let the market decide? Or, I mean, do we really need these regulations to begin with?
That's one of the primary questions of the paper, which is to say, we urge in taking a look at existing regulations, but also in carefully considering the need for new regulations, that there first be a do no harm approach, so that the potential sort of how could this regulation negatively impact not just the companies upon which it will initially be targeted, but also the consumers that in theory might be the object of protection. So we're looking at not ensuring that regulations are basically technology neutral, and where those regulations have had a negative impact, that they be either rescinded or carefully re-examined and implemented in a way that's not impinging and challenging, restricting innovation or the overall use by consumers.
Right. So is there any kind of hope that this will be ameliorated now that President Trump is in office? Because he's actually eliminating huge swaths of regulations. When new ones come in, he takes out a chunk of them. Instead of 1-for-1 or 2-for-1, he's doing 21 or 22-to-1 eliminating of regulations when new ones come in. Will this fall under that, or is this kind of outside of what his focus is, that it's not going to happen?
As unhelpful as this may be, I think in some sense, particularly with the ADA requirements, it may be a little bit too early to tell. there, I think there's an opportunity for DOJ to provide some guidance that would probably, hopefully, be welcome to both consumers and to companies, because right now they're sort of in a no person's land where they don't know what's expected of them, and the ambiguity of the existing regulation. And I think most of us think that the aspects of the ADA are critical. We believe in access to spaces, but ambiguity is neither helpful for corporations nor consumers. So with respect to that particular regulation, it's unclear. A couple of other examples that we highlight in the paper, one of which being something that most of your listeners may not have a good grip on, is, nor should they, frankly, is export controls around particular technology. And another example that we highlight are sort of the space around Uber and Lyft and the sharing economy. And there, I think we've seen a good bit of work at the state level resisting the application of, again, sort of outmoded regulations on sort of the new technology and the digital economy. So I think we're seeing good progress, and we just hope that as the administration continues to work on its regulatory reform, that it follows our recommendations of seeking not to do any harm, and I think we'll continue to see good progress.
All right. Well, I'm really glad that you're on the case here, and I'm hopeful that your recommendations will kind of be the mantra for the administration as they move forward with addressing these issues. And I really want to say thanks for your time. Megan Stifel, Hoover Institute Fellow, former Cybersecurity Policy Advisor to the White House, National Security Council. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks very much for having me.
All right. Talk again soon. So now I want to pivot over to we actually have this audio of Megyn Kelly blasting Jane Fonda's complaining about their plastic surgery interview. And this is one of the most effective takedowns of Jane Fonda that I've ever heard. And we haven't heard much from Megyn Kelly lately. Obviously, she's still doing her daytime program on the Today Show. But this is one of those situations where someone agrees to come on your show. They then go out later and publicly vilify you and insult you. This is what happened to Megyn Kelly. Jane Fonda is actually really acting as if she didn't know that the movie that she did, with the primary theme of that movie is aging, women and aging, that would prompt Megyn Kelly to ask her about her plastic surgery, which she has discussed publicly on many occasions before. So I want to listen to this, and we're getting close to the end of the show, so we won't have a ton of commentary about it, but I just want you to listen to this description by Megyn Kelly of Hanoi Jane. And it's all the truth. It's all verifiable. You can search online and find out about it. It's number 4.
The truth is, most older women look nothing like Fonda, who is now 80. And if Fonda really wants to have an honest discussion about older women's cultural face, then her plastic surgery is tough to ignore. Fonda herself knows this. She knows this. And that is why, to her credit, she has discussed her cosmetic surgery pretty much everywhere before coming on our show.
Last year I had plastic surgery, and I have been very public about it. I had to admit it. I feel so good. I'm so happy, and I didn't want to look kind of tired and jowly anymore. I feel so great and so rested, and I look so different, and I just decided, and I'm not proud of it, I decided I wanted to look more like how I feel.
And she said the same to Entertainment Tonight, to Access Hollywood, to W Magazine for a cover piece, to The Guardian. I could go on. Apparently, when she came here, however, again to promote her film about aging, I was supposed to discern that this subject was suddenly off limits. Look, I gave her the chance to empower other women, young and old, on a subject which she purports to know well, and she rejected it. That's okay. But I have no regrets about that question. Nor am I in the market for a lesson from Jane Fonda on what is and is not appropriate. After all, this is a woman whose name is synonymous with outrage. Look at her treatment of our military during the Vietnam War. Many of our veterans still call her Hanoi Jane, thanks to her radio broadcast, which attempted to shame American troops. She posed on an anti-aircraft gun used to shoot down our American pilots. She called our POWs hypocrites and liars, and referred to their torture as understandable. Even she had to apologize years later for that gun picture, but not for the rest of it. By the way, she still says she is not proud of America. So the moral indignation is a little much. She put her plastic surgery out there. She said she wanted to discuss the plight of older women in America. And honestly, she has no business lecturing anyone on what qualifies as offensive.
Woo! Drop the mic on Hanoi Jane. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. Okay, so if that's what her show's like, I might have to tune back in. Listen, that's the whole show. God bless you. I will be back with you tomorrow afternoon with more Stacy on the Right. UrbanFamilyTalk.com is the website. Head over there and check it out. Thanks for being here. God bless.